if the shit really hits the fan, where the U.S. really goes into an open conflict with China.
Would the United States, in the case of an invasion, have to put boots on the ground? Would we have to put U.S. soldiers here?
The U.S. soldiers, their boots will be probably on the platforms of their aircraft carriers, on their ships, on their submarines.
That's truly a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, but not on the land
quickly
of
that could
Taiwan.
escalate.
Yeah.
But okay, so not on the land.
Yeah, not on the land. But yeah, because you need to engage with the POA and Navy. You're gonna have submarine warfare. You're gonna have all these different things happening. Hardcore engagements. Everybody neck on neck.
I think that should give us courage.
Exposure to other people's perspectives.
Moving us in a good direction.
Stephen Wang, welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. Let's dive right into it. We're in Taiwan. Let's talk about hard power. Let's talk about China and Taiwan. Give me some data.
Fantastic. Yeah, so just kind of jumping straight away. Our military does suffer from a lot of, you would say, structural issues. For example, I mean, this is kind of open information if you go onto the Taiwanese Legislative Yuan's information system. But basically, as of 2021, and I am confident to say that perhaps the situation hasn't improved significantly ever since the data in 2021. But it's basically how within a lot of what we consider as frontline units. So, for example, the Army's Artillery Corps, the Marine Corps in Taiwan, and also a lot of, you can say, missile units. Within those units, there are a lot of, you can say, shortcomings when it comes to staffing issues. The enlisted ranks, the NCO and the CO ranks of those troops, the data kind of suggests that part of those three categories are below 80% currently.
And how many personnel are we talking about? What's the total? How many amphibious units? How many land-based units? What are we talking about?
So when it comes to the precise distribution of these manpowers in different services, I currently couldn't pick up a very precise one, but we have around, if you include everybody, including the combatant and not combatant personnel in Taiwan, we have around 145,000 personnel, which is quite significant, but it is still a little bit falling behind in our expectations. So legally speaking, we can expand our troops to about 161,000. So we still have,
legally, like in terms of an international doctrine or Taiwanese law?
In terms of payrolls.
Oh, payrolls.
Yeah. So we can offer, our military is capped at offering 161,000 positions. But currently we have active duty service members of 145,000, around that figure. And the Marine Corps, is considered one of the elite units in Taiwan. So we're probably talking about drifting the numbers between probably 10,000 around those troops. But the reality on the ground is when it comes to the frontline units that are going to operate deadly weapons, encountering the POA in whatever wartime scenario, currently we're not fully staffed. We're not very satisfied with our performances. It is understood by a lot of people that currently in many democratic countries and maybe authoritarian countries as well, where you really couldn't get to 90% of people fully staffed. But that being said, when Taiwan is confronting with the enemy that's so big, you need to set the standard higher. You need to give yourself a higher expectation.
But even if you had 3 or 4 times that number of troops, China has the largest standing man army, as far as I know.
Yes.
And you would still be outgunned just by sheer manpower.
That is correct if you want to compare pure numbers. But there are two kind of challenges for the POA when it comes to really going on par with
What's
the Taiwanese.
the POA?
The People's Liberation Army.
Okay.
So the mainland China, the communist China, is a very thick country. It has a lot of borders. And the borders right now, especially the ones with India, is very tense. So even if you add, maybe they have some kind of border patrol, maybe other kinds of law enforcement personnel, but the POA has to be scattered around all these very long borders they have. So when it comes to the real troops that need to face Taiwan and is kind of assigned to attack Taiwan in a conflict scenario, even if they outnumber us maybe one time or two times, this goes to the second deficiency. It's basically there's a water between the mainland and Taiwan. So trying to transport all those people to Taiwan in a rapid way is probably going to be very difficult for them. So
You think you could shoot down those transport carriers with cruise missiles or drones or something before they got here?
yes, and that is an interesting question. I would say our military and our you can say scholars that are into these topics. They are quite confident in our capabilities, but there's also one caveat I do have to say. Conventionally, people will think about a conflict scenarios where it's kind of like a D-Day, like Normandy.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But the interesting thing is, as Taiwan gets more industrialized, a lot of the west coastlines of Taiwan are getting increasingly difficult for amphibious landings. You will have probably more windmills at the shores. You'll probably have more, a literal translation in English is like wave blockers, right? You have those giant pieces of concrete, laid down on the shores, and you have more industry facilities. You have more ports facilities at the western part of Taiwan. So if you want to find a beach that is as ideal as the ones in Normandy, they are depleting.
Why do you need a beachhead? Why can't they just paratroop 7-8 million people in here?
Oh yes, and that goes to the second part in which the nature of PLA landing in Taiwan has changed because of our coastlines changes. They are now using what we call dynamic landing strategy. Basically, they probably will try to copy what has been done by the U.S. Rangers and U.S. military during the Vietnam War, where you have the rapid transportation of troops via helicopters. In that kind of scenario, they are still going to be in a vulnerable position if our military is ready.
Do you have surface-to-air missiles to shoot the helicopters down? And what's the situation? Yeah.
So in Taiwan, we do have our own indigenously made weapons. You can say, I'm not sure about the precise missile types, but we do have or will have Harpoon, Stinger missiles.
Oh, you have Stingers?
Yes, we do. Oh. And so we probably is planning on purchasing more. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So we do have a considerable amount of MenPads. So personnel, what is it? Yeah, I forgot the full name of that acronym, but MenPad, basically you're talking about Stingers, Javelin missiles, all these different things that will cause deadly effects on helicopters. Yeah.
So you can make any attempted invasion costly.
That is the ideal situation. That is what our military tries to achieve, and that will be probably so far, as the situation is right now, probably the most desirable goal that we want to achieve. We want to let the Chinese to think twice. We're gonna make the opportunity cost of doing that continues to be unbearable for Xi Jinping in the foreseeable future.
But there are no nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons within the arsenal. Is that correct?
As far as my understanding goes, yes, we don't have those things.
And the reason you haven't developed those is for ethical considerations?
We do have ethical considerations, but we also need to consider the ramification of the region's response. I mean, it is not a secret. You can Wikipedia this, but Taiwan used to have a secret nuclear plan program. One is called Project Taoyuan. It's one of the names of the city. Yeah, and that was the closest moment where R.O.C. could have acquired a nuclear weapon. But now we don't have them because not only are the Chinese, but also I would say Washington and around the world are very cautious about nuclear proliferation.
Are you worried about the Chinese coming in and sabotaging military facilities here?
We do need to consider all different scenarios. So that is why I would say some efforts are being made, both in terms of hardware and also in terms of our legal aspect, trying to reinforce the base parameters around Taiwan. But given how, I mean, we can do this two ways, right? You can use technology to support it, more cameras and more high-tech security means.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if we do not have enough personnel to be on guard, then the risk always exists.
But you have conscription here.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And so, but only for males.
Only for males.
Why?
So that's a good question. I'm not sure what the writers or the founding fathers of the ROC thinks about this, but one of the things which is improving currently is we are slowly getting more female reservists who previously volunteered into military careers and right now are reserve to go back in and do trainings with their male counterparts right now. So yeah, so you do have.
Well, you would double the number of people by definition if you had women, right?
Yes, yeah, I would say so.
Where do the soldiers receive their training? Do they go to the U.S.? Do they go to NATO? Where do they go?
Oh, that's a good question, and do bear with me. This probably might be a little bit long, but we have different. So we have conscripts, we have volunteers.
Okay.
And for conscripts, I would say 100% of conscripts like me. I used to. I was a 4-month so-called military trainee, but I do consider.
Oh, so you've been in the Taiwanese military?
Yes, I was in the artillery corps.
Oh, excellent.
But it would not be a exaggeration, and maybe some of my people, if they're here with me, they would kind of agree that we were cannon fodders. We didn't receive the trainings that, in my personal experience, I didn't receive the trainings that I believe I should get. So, for example, I'm an artillery guy, but I never touched my artillery. Never. I did saw my artillery. By touch, I mean I never took it onto a drill.
Yeah.
I never initiated a fire sequence. I only kind of touched it. It's like, oh, this is my artillery piece.
That's not very comforting to me.
Yeah, it's not. And it is not for a lot of people who had the same experience as I did, 4-month military trainings. So for people like us, conscripts, whether that be a 4-month military trainee or in our new system, which is back to a year, we all allocate ourselves into specific locations to do new trainings. So you're talking about my base, which was very famous, is called Chenggongling in Taichung City. You also have another one in Yilan and a few more other places around Taiwan. But when it comes to volunteer troops, for example, whenever we will receive new equipment from the United States, we always need seed instructors, right? So, for example, we're getting the main battle tanks, M1A2T, T for Taiwan. I would not be surprised if we already sent some of our troops to the U.S. to receive some instructional trainings, and then they will return to Taiwan, and then they will pass on those knowledge to other people in the Armored Corps. So we do have some of our forces doing trainings in the United States and also in Taiwan, but with other foreign counterparts.
Is there a relationship with NATO or no?
I would say there are some relationship with NATO. I can recall not precise dates, but they were definitely, for example, NATO has a defense university in Rome.
Right.
And their, I think it's their principal or their dean or a president actually visited Taiwan. And we do have scholars going to NATO facilities to do some interesting conversation.
Have there been conversations about security pacts or alliances or treaties, or that's just way outside the scope of NATO?
I think currently is still way outside the scope of NATO. Given the name of NATO, they still remain a little bit hesitant when it comes to, should the Japanese or the South Koreans have a liaison office in Brussels? They also are probably a little bit hesitant on that because they don't want to cross that out given the name.
How is the military alliance with the Philippines, with the Japanese? Like, are those strong alliances? Are there treaties governing those relationships?
You mean for Taiwan?
For Taiwan, for Taiwan, yeah.
Oh yes. Currently, we unfortunately we do not have any formal security arrangements with Philippines and with Japan. But
So there's no like Article 5, an attack on one is an attack on all. There's nothing like that.
oh, nothing like that. One of the unique things about U.S. security apparatus, global security apparatus, is on the Atlantic side you have a very well constructed Article 5 style treaty-based system. But in the Pacific region, everything is fragmented. You have separate security guarantees and security relationship of Washington with all these countries, but they probably don't have that with each other. You know, the U.S. tried this during the Cold War with, I think it's CETO, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, CETO.
Okay.
But
I'm not familiar, but okay.
Oh yeah, but that kind of failed because Southeast Asia back in the days was a very complicated place. So the U.S. did try to have CENTO as well, which is Central or East Asian, which is Iraq, Iran before it was when Iran still has a Shah. There was CENTO, there was CETO, and there were NATO. And NATO was the only one that kind of survived until now.
So within the Indo-East Pacific, you have certain regional alliances. Are there any countries that have opted out of those alliances?
I would say there were some turbulences, but from the Washington's perspective, there were definitely turbulence when it comes to the depths of their security cooperation. For example, in the Philippines, when President Duterte was in power, the relationship with the United States was a little bit tense. And the U.S. was kind of, they had to get out of one of the biggest bases they used to have in the Philippines. But now, my understanding is they're slowly coming back, and the Philippines, they kind of allow the U.S. to go into more bases.
Yeah, that I was just reading about this. Technically, it's illegal to have bases, but they redefine those, and the guy, Bong Marcos, is now pro-U.S., and he's taken a very pro-U.S. stance, and the U.S. has invested money for, $1 billion for semiconductors, and the U.S. has really making some inroads. I don't know if that's to counter China's hegemony in the region. I don't know why that is. Okay, so let's take a step back. If you were to give odds for the next year or two for a Chinese blockade of Taiwan, what would you say those odds would be? 5%, 10%, 90%?
I would say
not an invasion, a blockade.
Yeah, a blockade. I would say, let me just kind of make it a little bit complicated.
Sure.
So in the first scenario, when we talk about a really like a hardcore blockade where you have Chinese ships basically creating a quarantine zone around Taiwan, I think the probability is below 5%.
Oh, really?
But if we are talking about some sort of smart blockade, which basically means China goes to hunt the sources of Taiwan's energy suppliers. So the reason why the first one is less than 50%, the other one is likelihood is higher than 5%, but I have no idea how Xi Jinping or Beijing is going to play that. But the reason why the first is below 5% is within the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, there is a saying that the first battle has to be the last battle. Because
I don't understand.
So basically it means that when the war starts, the Chinese are anticipating immediate response from the United States. But the US response takes time. So if China couldn't win, basically, if we want to define winning, basically means taking control of Taiwan, right? Actually taking control of Taiwan. If they couldn't do that within, you can say the time frame goes between a week or 2 weeks, 7 days, 14 days, then it is going to be a prolonged conflict because then the U.S. probably will intervene with whatever assets they have with the Indo-PACOM. So if China does initiate a hardcore blockade, that is sending a very clear message to Taiwan's partners and allies that yes, the Chinese are going to do this and they will double down their support on Taiwan. So one of the things that I do need to mention in the Taiwan Relations Act, which is a very interesting law, domestic law within the U.S., is I remember is in the the preset, the description of the law, or in one of those clauses, one of the preconditions for U.S. to maintain official diplomatic relationship with the PRC is under the assumptions that the Taiwan issue, the cross-race issue, will be resolved peacefully with consent from both sides. So if China decided to unilaterally attack Taiwan or initiate those kind of hardcore blockade, according to the TRA, maybe the Congress will interpret that as, China broke a lot of one of those core assumptions, in that the U.S. is currently at liberty to do whatever security arrangements or supports they want with Taiwan. But that's one of those nightmare scenarios that the Chinese don't want to entertain. So that is why a hardcore blockade, you have a higher chance to invoke that scenario.
Right.
The second part, which is going to the source, is, for example, Taiwan gets a lot of its liquefied natural gas and coal also from other countries that is a little bit awkward. My data is a little bit old, but as of, I would say, around 2021, 2022, around, I would say, 8% of Taiwan's coal either directly or indirectly comes from Russia. Australia and all these other like-minded allies, yes, they do support a lot of Taiwan's coal, Taiwan's natural gas, but petroleum is overwhelmingly depends on the Middle East. So another interesting scenario can be where if Xi Jinping or any one of those CCP officials goes on a state visit to the Middle East, and then maybe tell the Saudi diplomats or Qatari official says, whatever the Taiwanese are paying you, I pay you double. Broke whatever contracts you have with them. So that will be some very tricky scenario Taiwan has to deal with. You go to the supplier. You don't blockade Taiwan, but you go to the supplier.
Boy, that's extraordinarily difficult. Places you in an extraordinarily difficult position.
Yes.
Well, so let's steelman, in other words, let's give the best argument for how the Chinese think about two things. The first thing is, what is their thinking about why they should control Taiwan? Like, is it a moral justification? Is it semiconductors? Is it geopolitical? Is it just to poke a thumb in the eye of the U.S.? What is it? What's the thinking?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Number one.
Did you see that, Reed? He said I asked a good question 3 times now. Okay, I like you. You're one of my favorite guests so far. So keep going.
Lovely. I knew that's gonna work.
That's good. It worked very well. Go ahead.
Yeah. So number one is the CCP has its own manifested destiny.
Okay.
And there's an interesting thinking in China, or the Chinese civilization as a whole, where in Japan you can say the emperor comes from one root and it goes for 10,000 years. There's a saying in Japanese for that. But in China, the interesting thing is the Chinese view the state of China as a continued entity, that the mandate of heaven is always there. So that is why a lot of times in the Chinese historical context, China as a state entity always exists, but the name of the country changes from, the Shah dynasty. That's why you have all these different dynasty names. And people firmly believe that, when somebody got a so-called mandate of heaven, they would unify the country. That's the old saying goes in the Three Kingdom romance books that people are used to is, once divided, we'll be united, something like that. So the CCP does have the same historical perspectives. They do believe that, number one, they have the mandate of heaven. They have the right to rule. And
it's terrifying to me.
Yeah, and the one piece, one of the most lacking piece of that, and by the way, they also do have, I would say, partially self-inflicted victim mentality. They always say the West is trying to oppress, oppress China. The same with the Soviet Union, right? You have that siege mentality. They want to contain us and everything. The first island chain, second island chain, NATO, whatever they're doing, which is very eerie given how the current president of Russia also says the same thing, siege mentality. So they do believe, number one, they have the mandate to rule. The last piece to acquire the full mandate is to get Taiwan. They got Hong Kong. they got Macau. And victim mentality is
Yeah, they
basically...
got Hong Kong and Macau, huh?
Yeah, so they basically said, Taiwan is a product of Western intervention, where the humiliation, century-long humiliation ever since the late Qing dynasty continues until now. We need to get Taiwan to rejuvenate the Chinese nation. This is our destiny. We have the mandate. So that is the somewhat historical, emotional aspect in which they will project that kind of propaganda to the Chinese citizens or to anybody that kind of subscribe to the ideas overseas. And now strategic reasons and so when it comes to grand strategy,
Yeah.
China does consider itself as a traditional regional power, the same as India will say, I'm a South Asian, kind of like the leading nation, right? So in order to do that, Beijing has to acquire Taiwan. So from a tactical perspective, if you do not hold Taiwan, I mean, currently, number one, Eli Ratner, the Assistant Secretary of Defense, had testified this in Congress, is he basically says Taiwan is the interlocking point of the first island chain. And if the first island chain doesn't go away, the PLAN, which is People's Liberation Army Navy, a stupid name, but that's how they call their navy, they will forever be a coastal power. They want to acquire Taiwan. They want to make Taiwan Strait a China Lake. And by doing so, they will have a lot of bargaining chips with other countries. Because, to a certain extent, people in Washington, their thinking is still correct, I would say. They do believe that holding Taiwan being a sovereign nation in the names of R.O.C. or in whatever names that is outside of the actual control of the CCP, is the key to maintain U.S. hegemony, is the key to maintain U.S. strategic advantage in the Indo-Pacific region. Because once the Chinese control Taiwan, the Japanese and the Koreans, number one, these two countries are heavily dependent on trade, international trade. Their energy routes also goes beside Taiwan. They won't enter the Taiwan Strait. It's a little bit too dangerous, but they will go by the eastern shore of Taiwan. So, the Taiwan also is the gateway, the exit point, northern exit point of South China Sea, which is one of the busiest water in the world when it comes to maritime trade. So if you control Taiwan, you control the trade, you control the energy flow to South Korea and to Japan. And when the South Koreans and the Japanese realize their livelihood has been held hostage by Beijing, it will be interesting to see how they will balance how to appease China while still being committed to a security arrangement with the United States. So if you lose Taiwan, you lose South Korea, you lose Japan as your security partner, you probably lose the Philippines, you basically lost the entire western and northern part of Indo-Pacific region. Then your second island chain, you gotta retreat your island chain to either Guam or back to Hawaii. So US will no longer be a Pacific power.
I have to process that. That's quite a bit to take in. Is there any talk of or possibility of a strike on mainland China if they become aggressive toward Taiwan, or is it strictly the porcupine strategy, very defensive?
So that's an interesting question. That's a good question. That's why
See that, Reed? That's four.
Yeah, that's
four.
a good question.
You're my best guess so far.
Thank you. Because in Taiwan, let me kind of generalize this in a very irresponsible way. You have different schools of how to defend Taiwan within Taiwan itself. You have the porcupine strategy, which is mostly defensive. You also have the other one who advocates for more source striking capability. So longer range missiles that can hit Shanghai, Beijing, or whatever infrastructure a long range, you can say medium range missiles can hit. So you do have those schools arguing against each other. How far should we let our missiles fly? How deadly should we make our missiles be? How many of different types of missiles we should have? So that is still an ongoing debate. But currently, from my understanding with the defense budgets that we have passed in Taiwan, we are heading towards the direction of mass-produced indigenous missiles, probably more defensive.
Medium range, long range, medium range.
Medium range, probably more
yeah.
defensive types.
Yeah.
And the fact that we, during the President Trump's era, we acquired, they're not fully delivered to Taiwan yet, but we acquired 400 Harpoon missiles. And then not fully delivered, but that kind of indicates the future of our defense strategy. So
And cruise missiles.
cruise missiles, we probably have some, but they're probably not the main type that we are advocating for at this point.
How many, do you know China, how many aircraft carriers they have? Do you think that would be like, how do you, because I'm trying to think of, and this is way outside my area of expertise, how do you imagine, we talked about a blockade, and I would imagine you would think that an actual invasion would be an even smaller possibility. Is that correct? Like
In the short term, yes.
Oh, that means in the long term it's greater.
In the long term, so here's the thing about politics and policy. It is bad politics if you have to set a timeline. It is good policy if you have to set a timeline. Because policy meaning that, I want to see progress. But political assessments, if you include numbers, that makes people nervous, right? 2027, is that a deadline? What's going to happen after 2027? People's going to be obsessed with that number. But there is a reason why the U.S. military brought that number up again. It is kind of because they firmly believe that the Chinese will acquire the ability to initiate, the ability to attack Taiwan by 2027. But capability does not translate fully into intention. That's for sure. So maybe Xi Jinping in his mind is say, okay, by 2027, I want to have that option.
And what does that look like? Does that look like aircraft carriers and then just securing beachheads, and as we spoke about, helicopters dropping people and parachuting people? Like what is that like? How would you imagine an invade? The most likely scenario for an invasion would be what?
So if we are really talking about, there are different kind of scenarios the PLA might entertain. So I think number one is definitely significantly disrupt and incapacitate whatever capability we have on the ground. So, I mean, one of the most ideal situation is you want to suppress the Taiwanese Navy in the port so they can't come out and engage.
Right, like the 7-Day War, yeah.
You want to eliminate as many F-16s or whatever aircrafts we have, and you want to basically destroy whatever infrastructures in Taiwan we have, major infrastructures. That is why in Taiwan, we have a concept, and I don't know the official English translation, but it's kind of like a sectorial defense mentality.
What is it in Mandarin?
I actually forgot a professional term in Mandarin too, but it's kind of like 战区责任制. So it's kind of like you're responsible for the middle part of Taiwan, southern part of Taiwan, and northern part of Taiwan. Do not expect any cross-section reinforcement. Do not. You have to fight alone in central Taiwan, southern Taiwan, and northern Taiwan. Because when the Chinese invade, they will blow up our highway system. They will blow up whatever means that we can transport, railways, highway systems, tunnels. I'm not sure if they know some. Do not expect we can dispatch an armored corps from the south to support the middle, because it will be extremely difficult. So each regiment that is garrisoned in their part of Taiwan, they are expected to fight by themselves, as long as possible. So I would say when it comes to the capability that the PLA wants to have is precisely that. You wanna destroy whatever communications Taiwan can have with the outside world. You want to...
Cut internet cables, I'd imagine.
Yes, undersea cables. Those information are extremely transparent. You can just go onto a commercial company that is specializing underwater mappings. You can find the connecting port of Taiwan's undersea cable with the other region. Cut them off. Taiwanese civilians cannot communicate outside. Banking system is going to collapse. You're gonna hit a lot of oil storage facilities, let the civilians be anxious. There's no oil, there's no fuel, basically no phone service, no cell phone service, and basically
What a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. And so yeah, that's what the Chinese are thinking. So that is scenario one of those.
Sounds like a lovely
yeah.
leadership.
Yeah, so that is one of the scenario. Basically, cut off whatever Taiwan can do externally. So surround the island. Your infrastructure is messed up. Just wait and see when you're gonna surrender. And the other one is basically how if they don't surrender, then we probably have to do this the hard way. You have to go into very nasty urban warfare, because Taiwan's flatlands are extremely urbanized. You have all these concrete jungles in Taiwan. You don't have a lot of space for armor maneuvers in Taiwan.
And I hope you have plans for a brutal insurgency.
So hopefully we do. I'm probably not
Privy
high
to
enough
those.
to have those information. So
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we talked about the blockade. We talked about the invasion. We talked about some of the consequences. Okay, Stephen, do you have any plans for energy independence, battery technologies, renewables,
Oh yeah, that's a
solar?
yeah. Again, very good question. That is probably currently the softest spots for Taiwan, given how I think we're drifting between 98 to 99% of our energy is imported, which means we will be particularly sensitive to a lot of changes and fluctuations of energy price around the world. So battery, I have to be responsible. I don't really know a lot about batteries. But when it comes to renewable energy, I know the current government and the incoming Lai Ching administration, also a DPP administration, will probably still pushing for that. So the key, probably one of the, I wouldn't say short-term or medium-term, but one of the more practical solution, but it is also a risky solution, is nuclear power. Taiwan, we used to have very substantial nuclear power. But now I think it's reduced to around 8 to 5% on a daily basis about the powers they generate. And if the government really want to fulfill their zero nuclear policy by 2025, which is a little bit difficult for them right now, then zero nuclear power in Taiwan. All of the power plants we have operating right now will be decommissioned. And that pushes our energy dependency to 100%. Which is not good. So the tragedy for Taiwan, but also the blessing, 'cause when you have a blessing, you also have a tragedy. You have a curse. Is Taiwan is a major economy. Taiwan has TSMC. Taiwan has all these fantastic heavy industry and high-tech industries. And also you have people with very high living qualities. Everybody has air conditioning. Everybody, the fact that everybody wants to have high efficiency computers, all these electronics in their homes.
Let me pause if you don't mind. So what accounts for these Asian tigers? What accounts for like Singapore's rise, Taiwan's rise? Like, why are there so many hyper successful industries here when, is it safe to say 50 years ago, this place was just absolutely not like that whatsoever? Like why? Why?
Fantastic question.
Fantastic read.
Yeah. So two sides. Number one, managed and controlled economy from these four tigers. Number two is the willingness for the United States.
Oh, and the four tigers are what?
You got Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the other one is South Korea, I think.
Okay, yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah, but I'll be embarrassed if I'm wrong, but I'll take that.
I think you're right, yeah.
The second most critical thing is outsourcing from the United States.
What do you mean?
So the thing is, the reason why the U.S. semiconductor industry or a lot of these high-tech industry are falling behind this Asian counterpart is because they outsource a lot of those productions to Asian countries that are rising in their economy. So for the examples of Taiwan and South Korea, we took an entirely different path. The South Koreans used chaebol, which is conglomerates, to support their national developments. Samsung, LG, all these companies you can think about. Taiwan, we advocate for small to medium-sized business, but also at the same time, we have very large companies and enterprises. But it is our government's policy. So when the founder of TSMC, Zhang Zhongmou, Morris Chang, he used to work in Texas, one of those big companies, I think Texas Machines, but he used to work for one of those tech companies in the United States. And he realized that Taiwan has a lot of potential because one of the government's managed economy policy is, number one, get everybody educated. You're gonna be literate. You're gonna be high quality labor. You are cheap labor. During the 60s and the 70s, the government is gonna support whatever industry related business ideas you have. This is why you have in the 60s and the 70s, a lot of the plastic toys that the kids in the U.S. are getting are made in Taiwan. We were the world factory. We were China before China. So we established a very good, you can say, value-adding industry.
Look, this is way outside my area, but it just seems to me that there's something else going on there. If I'm wrong, tell me. Like, it just seems to me, for that to operate at all, you have to have something like, for example, the rule of law.
Yes.
A strong rule of law. Which in many countries they don't, and so I don't see that phenomenon spreading of the Asian tigers, for example, to places in sub-Saharan Africa. So there seem to be certain conditions that would be operative here, that would be fertile soil for a kind of booming, flourishing economic landscape. Or no, am I wrong?
Oh, no, I think you're entirely correct in a way that Taiwan is lucky and blessed to have, but also at the same time, yes, it is controversial.
Finish the sentence. Blessed to have what?
Excellent bureaucrats. We have very good bureaucrats, efficient bureaucrats with less tendency for corruption. So we have a very good premier. His name is called Sun Yun-xuan. He's a model example where he really worked. He devoted his entire life for public service, and when he retired from the premiership, which is prime minister, he didn't have a lot of assets with him. He devoted himself entirely making the right call, making the lucky call, and make Taiwan what it is today, with the right kind of decision to be made. So we have excellent bureaucrats, which a lot of them back in the days are U.S. educated. And also, so bureaucrats, engineers, and all these people in the government of Taiwan back in the days were very, you can say, yes, it is a authoritarian regime, but also at the same time, it is a paranoid authoritarian regime, basically meaning it is fearful for its survival. So it really needs to grow itself. It really needs to increase its economic capacity. The government of R.O.C. changed its mentality on Taiwan from 1950 to the 1960s and onward. In the 1950s, Chiang Kai-shek and the R.O.C. was eager to counterattack, to go back to the mainland. So Taiwan was seen as a temporary base for counterattack. But as situation changes, as you have the Korean War and the defense treaty with the United States, the government of the R.O.C. and the KMT realized, we're going to be in Taiwan for a while. We better make this place rich. It is a competition of system. At the other side, you have Cultural Revolution, you have the Great Leap Forward, you have the CCP trying to say communism with Chinese characteristics works. But the R.O.C. and the KMT in Taiwan basically says, we want to be the counterpart of that. We need to be different from them and compare. It's a competition of systems. We want to demonstrate that a sort of controlled economy and a planned economy, but also on a more, you can say, egalitarian basis. So we have a very successful land reform in Taiwan, giving the farmers the land of their own. Make themselves more capable, economically more independent, and with the right amount of policy, we can make this work. We don't have to go through those, commune, shared community thing that the Communist Chinese are doing. We can do our own controlled policy-based, professional-based economic development plans, and that kind of worked. Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Maybe this is wading in territory that's wade, W-A-D-E, like walking through water, in territory that's out of your area of expertise. But it does seem to me to be, I'm trying to think of a politic way to say this. The people here seem to be pretty smart, pretty hardworking. They seem to value education very highly.
Yes.
And those seem to be cultural factors that contribute to the success. I mean, they would contribute to the success of any people, frankly. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is those qualities and characteristics, and I'm always struck by the civility of this place, by the cleanliness of it, by the way they treat their commons. That makes it an even bigger gem for China. I mean, if this were some shithole, right, that would be, Trump got a lot of grief for calling certain countries shitholes, but certain countries are shitholes. I mean, I don't see anybody vacationing in Haiti right now, for example. So that seems to me to make this more of a desirable target, independent of the kind of manifest destiny of the Chinese people. Is that? I also heard, I don't know if what truth to this is, but I also heard that there's a lot of illegal drug manufacturing here because the people here are incredibly good at STEM as a general. Is that true? Do you know about that?
I have no idea about that.
Oh, okay.
So I wish I have some answers, either as a yes answer or a no answer, but I'm not sure about that. But yes, we do have a lot of, Taiwan does value scientific subjects more than humanities. So.
I noticed that. I noticed that when we went to New Taipei. Was that at New Taipei University? And I noticed that, and I noticed the kinds of questions that people asked. Okay, so for the people watching this in the United States and Western Europe and Eastern Europe, the people watching this, why should they care about some kind of a Chinese blockade or invasion of Taiwan? Like, why some guy sitting at home in his living room in Iowa? Why should he care?
So for him, for the Iowa guy, I think number one, you probably got a significant shortfall of chips that's going to be going out of Taiwan. I remember it is either the All-American Truck Association, the president of that association, maybe I said the name of that organization wrong, but he did a testimony on Congress as well. It says the central part of America heavily relies on trucks of all sizes for their deliveries, for their livelihoods. So for the guy living in Iowa, you probably have less options of newer trucks to use. So, yeah, you want to get your produce out. I would imagine you'll be a farmer. The likelihood is there compared to somebody.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, a farmer, yeah.
Yeah, living in D.C., for example, he's probably or she's probably not a farmer. So if you want to support or sustain your business, you want to get new trucks, you probably have a problem with that because of the shortfalls of supplies of chips for trucks. And if you you're in the U.S., you probably can get the newest electronic products you want on Amazon or whatever you want.
But not without Taiwanese chips.
Yeah, so don't expect the iPhone 18, iPhone 19 coming out so soon. So those are probably the impacts that you will have. And if the shit really hits the fan, where the U.S. really needs to goes into an open conflict with China.
I was just going to ask you about that, yeah.
Yeah, so, bear in mind, the U.S. still has a conscription system, but it's just not being active right now.
Would the United States, in the case of an invasion, have to put boots on the ground? Would we have to put U.S. soldiers here?
The U.S. soldiers, their boots will be probably on the platforms of their aircraft carriers, on their ships, on their submarines.
That's truly a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, but not on the land of Taiwan.
How quickly that could escalate.
Yeah.
But, okay, so not on the land.
Yeah, not on the land. But yeah, because you need to engage with the PLA and Navy. You're gonna have submarine warfare. You're gonna have all these different things happening. Hardcore engagements. Everybody neck on neck. the military bases in Palau. As far as I know, there's only one satellite station. Okinawa, all the U.S. bases in Okinawa, probably some in U.S. Forces Korea. It really depends on the role of U.S. Forces in Korea. So, that being said, going back to the Iowa guy. You might imagine this is only a war between Taiwan and China, but also at the same time, the war can also proliferate into North Korea if they really want to.
Wow, you're reading my mind. I was literally just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about nearly the full asset of U.S. military in Northeast Asia will be in engagement.
I was going to say, with all the assets we have on the ground in South Korea, those would be, I'd imagine, consumed by the DMZ, but I don't. So this is just something that I've wondered for a long time. It's such a weird thing to think. I've never really asked anybody, but do you think that there's any scenario that the Chinese think, okay, let's talk about some kind of, we have a territorial ambition of the United States, or they've gone for Taiwan or what have you, and we're going to put boots on the ground in the U.S. Do you think that's just unthinkable?
I don't think the Chinese will do that.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but yeah.
Yeah, because strategically it is stupid, practically impossible. We need to also understand that U.S. itself is, because of certain cultures within the United States, for example, gun ownerships.
You were really reading my mind,
The United States has kind of turned into a place where it is hard to invade by a foreign power.
I think it's hard to invade. You should see my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Literally everybody owns multiple firearms, assault rifles, guns, everything, vests.
Yeah, I went to fire range in Virginia. It is a national sport. I really appreciate that aspect. So compared to Taiwan, in which our guns are heavily regulated, but if if Chinese troops goes to, they probably see fewer guns in California. But if they somehow ended up in Texas or ended up in where gun laws are more relaxed,
for a big surprise.
Yeah, so they would kind of realize that this is not easy.
So I've asked other people this question on the show that I find fascinating. It was Vivek Ramaswamy's suggestion that we give Taiwan a Second Amendment, and we just have everybody. We just arm everybody to the teeth.
I would say that can be done, but probably in a different way. But on principle, I kind of support that idea because
you will support or you will not. You support the idea?
Yeah, I kind of support the idea, and I think we have a lot of operational shortcomings when it comes to this. So number one, a lot of our rifles that our conscripts are using are the products of, we call the rifle type 65K2. 65 meaning it is the first model. It was produced in 1976. It's a little bit complicated. Taiwan has a different calendar system. Right? Sometimes you can see now is the year of 113. The year of the Republic 113. So whatever you see that number, add 1911. That will be your current date. So when I say the rifle is 65, so T65, it means it was made in the year of the Republic 65. You add 1911, 1976. So I use that gun. But the newest service rifle was made in 2002. But I never used that gun before.
I don't know why I assumed this, but I just assumed everybody used ARs and Glocks. I have no idea why I assumed that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very natural because our forces are currently entirely Americanized. I would say. Yeah, especially when it comes to firearms. So our T65 is a remodel of the Colt series, Colt family rifles. So it's basically one of those AR branches. The Saudis like our guns. The Haitians have some of our rifles, which is very nice. So yeah, they have more experience using them in combat scenario. We never use our own latest service rifle in combat scenario.
So just in terms of arming the citizenry here, given that everybody's so civilized, my guess, I don't know this, but if I were to speculate, it wouldn't turn into Reed's neighborhood, a bloodbath of people killing each other all over the place. But my guess is that the violent gun deaths would be minimal here, and it could be a prophylactic against, or partially, Chinese invasion. Because they would be, you would exact more of a cost for an invasion.
Yeah, you'll probably make the Chinese think twice. But when it comes to civility, it really depends because maybe in Taiwan we have very low tolerance of mass shooting. Unfortunately, because this morning we just had an incident where a guy carried a shotgun and into the entrance of the Ministry of Digital Affairs.
That wouldn't even make the news in our country.
Yeah, and he basically blown up one of the glass door and is on the news.
But he didn't kill anybody.
He didn't kill anybody.
Okay, that wouldn't. I don't think that would make the news in our country. No one would care.
Yeah, so given that will be a big news. But again, Ramaswamy's idea, Taiwan needs to work very hard to make that idea a reality because number one, right, U.S. has a rich history and a very high interest when it comes to gun culture, but in Taiwan we don't have those. So you probably need to start from more airsoft clubs, those type of stuff.
And just as a parenthetical, I was very much opposed to anything gun related until I became 53. And then I had a change of heart. Okay, so where are we now? Are you optimistic or pessimistic or what about China and potential military? Where are you? What are you thinking?
I am cautious and in the short term optimistic, but my definition of short term is until the U.S. election.
Oh, interesting.
But
and then what? And then what?
And then is either gonna be, going into the shit show or continue to be tense for a while. Because we need to consider so many elements. I mean, number one, by 2027 or 2028, I think, Xi Jinping, that will be at the end of Xi Jinping's third term. If he decided not to hand over power by then...
I thought he was already, quote unquote, voted that doesn't have to do that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he hasn't really talked about a successor probably means he wants the fourth term. And by that time, as people get older, especially for dictators, they are obsessed with whatever legacy they will leave behind. Putin has a great ambition of making himself on par with Peter the Great, with all these different Russian emperor and empress that really made Russia what it is today. Xi Jinping probably want to make himself on par with Mao Zedong, with all these great CCP leaders or even great emperors. So before he died, he probably was like Putin and says, fuck it, one day I will just do it. But he'll also be a little bit cautious because when Putin says that, the war is still happening. So he didn't win his bet. Yeah. But yeah, it also depends on who's going to be the next president of the United States.
Yeah.
Biden.
Who's better for Taiwan?
Oh, that's a terrific question because.
See that, Reed?
Yeah.
Terrific question. I asked a terrific question, Reed. Go ahead.
But because seriously, Taipei doesn't know.
Really?
Taipei has concern about the age of both president, number one, and number two is. Maybe it really depends on what Trump will do because yes, we probably have some presidents, we probably have some history to compare of how these two presidents treat Taiwan. One is to kind of basically President Trump, where he definitely gave Taiwan a lot of arm sales and everything.
He called them. He broke protocol and called them right away. I remember.
Yes, but Taiwan is also a little bit concerned about. John Bolton's memoir, when he says compares Taiwan as a pen and China as the table.
Yeah.
So Taiwan is concerned about the transactional elements of Trump's logic in foreign policy.
Tell us about that real quick, the pen and the table thing.
So it's basically, I think if I recall correctly, I need to reread that book again, but basically in a meeting that he was involved with Trump when I think the discussion somehow in that room led to which one is more important. And President Trump basically kind of made this metaphor about, look at this pen, this is Taiwan, look at this table, this is China, very big. So we need to deal with them first, and then we'll see what happens with this pen. So Trump's priority will be on China. be that good for Taiwan or bad for Taiwan, because and also, there's also regional implication for this, because Taiwan's security is also depends upon how closely connected the United States with the neighboring countries. Japan is very paranoid. There was some trauma when it comes to Trump's style of negotiation with the Japanese. The same with the Koreans. So another transactional part of Trump that probably might make Taipei a little bit anxious is the transactional part. Meaning, for example, if Trump says, okay, so what can you two offer me? China says, I'll give you 40 billion US dollars. Taiwan says, I'll give you 1 billion. If Trump uses that logic, he'll say, I want to deal with that guy. I want to deal business. And Taiwan, I will manage you. I'm not gonna let you sabotage my deal with China. Then you're either putting Taiwan in a good spot where, in my case, because I belong to the KMT camp, so not like the DPP. So my understanding is the best kind of strategy for Taiwan is to lay low profile, buying ourselves more time to construct our defense. So if Trump somehow made a deal with China, yes, that puts Taiwan probably in a low profile. But another return is basically we probably will not have new breakthroughs with the United States, if that is the case. But ultimately, Trump remains unpredictable. Biden's case, well, I would say he will remain tense. His way of managing China will still be kind of tense. But that being said, so I think China is getting used to the Taiwan issue under President Biden. So the way how Biden treats Taiwan and how Biden treats China, then it comes to the part of Taiwan. So the leader of Taiwan during President Trump or Biden's tenure, if he made some, decisions I consider as reckless and irresponsible, then you're putting Taiwan into a bigger risk.
Let me ask you a curveball question. I'll start with my own answer to the question. I am not proud of the fact that it's going to be a Trump-Biden runoff. I would just like, and I don't mean to be ageist about this, but someone more intellectually nimble. I would like people to be sharper, faster, quicker, more knowledgeable, I'm not proud of who we're putting forward. Are you proud of who you're putting forward in this country, even if you don't agree with their policy positions?
Oh, you mean in Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, if it were RFK versus Vivek Ramaswamy, you could have substantive disagreements, but I don't think anybody would be saying those guys are idiots.
Yeah.
Or if they're senile or they're drooling or whatever. Even the opposition, people with whom you have substantive disagreements, do you feel like, yeah, these people, we've got it going on, our democracy is pretty good, I may disagree, but this is a good representative?
Yeah, in Taiwan, so yeah, putting aside all politics, I mean, if we look at the qualities of all these different professions, right? So the KMT's candidate, Hou You-yi, he's a seasoned bureaucrat, and he was a police officer. He actually went into a gunfight in the early days of his police career. So he's a guy who really knows what a battlefield feels like. He's a skilled bureaucrat. He is the 2-term mayor of New Taipei City. He's incumbent. And before that, he was 2-term deputy mayor of Taipei City. So he's a seasoned politician, also a well-experienced police officer. And in DPP's case, the winner, President-elect Lai Ching-te, he was also a bureaucrat. He was the mayor of city of Tainan, premier, and before that he was a doctor. I think he's on public health. And on the TPP, the Taiwan People's Party, the third party we have in the parliament right now, he also came from a medical background. So
you're thinking these guys are like, I may disagree with them politically, but these are sharp.
Yeah, their responses remain sharp, compared to, I really...
You don't have to finish the sentence, but okay.
Yeah. I really don't want to do this, but this is not on me. This is not on me. So this is one of the comedian I really like is Shane Gillis.
Oh, yeah.
He's a terrific guy. I love his Trump impression. But one of the things that really made me laugh about what he said about Biden was, whenever Biden finishes a speech, he turns into a Roomba.
Yeah.
And like wanders around and all that.
Yeah.
So if I have a president, if I have a candidate like that, then I will be a little bit concerned. Yeah.
Is there? I have two more questions for you, and you've been generous with your time, so thank you.
Yep, no
Is
problem.
there anything I should have asked you that I didn't ask you?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know. I just love getting predictable, unpredictable questions. So
Were my questions predictable or unpredictable?
a mix of both.
Okay.
Yeah, a mix of both.
Okay.
I love that.
All right. So, my friend Melissa Chen tweeted this: Thailand's lawmakers have just overwhelmingly voted to recognize gay marriage. It's the first Southeast Asian and third Asian nation, other than Taiwan and Nepal, to do so. Notably, The Guardian referred to Taiwan as a country. You have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, I think it kind of shows how the Taiwanese society changed a lot. And I think I'm proud, and a lot of people in Taiwan will be proud about the fact that we are turning into a more diverse country. Diverse in terms of ideas, but when it comes to racial distinctions, we're still overwhelmingly Han Chinese as a society. But here's a charming thing about Japan is a very different case. But so for island nations, there's a really interesting feature of island nations and sea power countries, where these countries have a tradition and have a long history of not having only foreign goods bringing into their home, but also foreign ideas. Taiwan is gradually becoming a immigrant-based society. We are kind of slowly moving away from a nation state into a notion state.
Oh, interesting.
Basically, the simple idea of if you live in Taiwan, you love Taiwan society, you're part of us. Inclusive.
Even if you don't speak Mandarin like Reed.
Yeah, but no, unfortunately, our infrastructure still hasn't accommodate that. I really need to say Japan is still doing better than us. They have more English signs on their shops and everything, but compared to Taipei. But yeah, also there's an interesting fact about how the first LGBT or a parade in Taipei happened when Ma Ying-jeou was the mayor of Taipei.
Oh, interesting.
So KMT people traditionally associate KMT as a conservative party now, which is probably true, mostly true. But back in the days, KMT were very different. You have very diverse opinions within the party, and then the fact that you have a progressive, considered as a progressive mayor in Taipei during that time. So yeah, it is interesting to see what Thailand is doing. I personally really don't. So I think I have a very simple rule. It's kind of like a castle principle, I say. So I don't really care.
I don't know the castle principle. What's that?
Basically, I don't really care what you do in your
man's
spare
home
time.
is his castle.
Yeah. So it's like, as long as you're not hurting anybody, you know,
Yeah.
like, I don't really care what you do in your place.
Yeah.
You should be legally protected and be guaranteed of whatever you want to do in your place that's
With
harmless.
consenting adults.
Yeah, so like that. So that is why I'm open to the idea of, Taiwan. So I didn't really push really back on Taiwan passing that law.
Yeah.
So it was basically, good for them and, not going to affect me.
And it also, I think, endears the West to Taiwan in a sense, as that's seen as a Western value. Okay, so I asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything you want to ask me? Feel free to ask me. If not, that's 100% fine too.
Yeah, thank you. I don't, I cannot think of a question on top of my head.
Okay, do you want to ask Reed anything?
It's okay. Yeah, but lovely.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're good. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.